Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin our lunch speaker portion here. Hope you're enjoying your lunch. Our next speaker is going to be joining us here to talk to us this afternoon. Joining us from Beck's, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Mr. I apologize, my notes are not running at the moment. It's my fault. Mr. Jon Skinner, Regional Agronomy Manager for Beck's Hybrids. There we go, it's starting to run. We're excited to welcome Jon Skinner to the Illinois Soybean Summit. You can unlock higher soybean yields by improving root growth and nutrient uptake. Today, Jon will dive into Beck's latest agronomic research, revealing how small changes beneath the surface can lead to big results in the field. Please join me in welcoming Jon Skinner.
Well, I appreciate the warm welcome, and thank you. For you guys that have students out there, if you guys are educators, I think it's important for you to know if they want to go into the agronomy field, you need to let them know that they get 3 distinct presenting times. It's either one right before lunch, one during lunch, or at the very end of the day, okay? So if you got kids going into it or you're an educator, you got to let them know that stuff. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about influencing soybean roots and yield, and that's through our practical farm research program that we do here at Beck's. Over the last 60 years, we've been doing on-farm studies at our locations to help drive yield, to help look at new management practices and ways to influence yield, productivity, and return on investment through testing different products and practices. All right. So over the past 3 or 4 years, we've embarked on a journey through our practical farm research called Root Reveal. Now, I fully understand that I'm here at the Soybean Summit today. We're going to spend 5 minutes on corn because I got to let you know where our thought pattern's at and how this is going to influence soybeans coming down the pipeline. So Root Reveal is a project where we started looking at corn roots and seeing how they change, they develop, how they influence our yield, our disease progression, our nutrient uptake when we changed the population, when we looked at them in different environments, and when we strategically placed nutrients to help gain better influence of those nutrients to the plant and ultimately influence yield. So over the past 3 years, we've been looking at this, and we've came to some great correlations of how this is affecting our yield of management on products. Every year we go out and we plant everything in our lineup, we dig them up, we take pictures of them, and we categorize them into 3 distinct rooting categories: vertical, balanced, and horizontal. Obviously the vertical roots, they're deep, they're penetrating, they're very narrow. Balanced is a cross between the horizontal ones, which are a big umbrella, and the vertical ones, all right? So we did this. This is what we did on our own. 2 years ago, we entered into a collaboration with the University of Illinois, right here on campus with Dr. Fred Below's lab in the crop physiology department. They have taken this to the next level for us, and this year is the first year we've discovered some really concrete correlations and things we can do to influence yield on corn, okay? So we look at them from a field view, and then we look at them from the full genetic potential of a corn root. You guys know a corn root can grow that big? That's an old chemical tote. One seed in there, fertigate it, irrigate it, look at the maximum potential. Correlate that to what we find them growing in the field, give us that root architecture, see how we can influence it, all right? So we grow those out, and then we come to some real brief findings here. When we look at some of those vertical plants like I showed you, they respond to population. When we increase the population, we increase yield on them almost every single time. When we side dress nitrogen on those things, they have a hard time increasing yield to a significant level. All right? They have a hard time branching out and getting access to that nitrogen that's in the soil. When we took these to Dr. Fred Below's lab, he came back and he said these vertical rooted corns like this, they put on an ear that's typically fixed. When we want to increase yield on those, we have to do it by increasing the kernel weight. We're not putting on more kernels to those, all right? So when I think about this and I think about a soybean, we can influence yield in soybeans in a couple different ways, right? More nodes per plant, more pods per node, or increased seed weight. These kind of vertical ones are kind of like increasing the seed weight in the pod. All right, when we look at those horizontal ones, those big umbrella root architectures, if I push population on these, they go down significantly in yield. All right, but when I side dress nitrogen to them, they have a huge significant increase in yield. And so when I look at this, and a little fun fact here, those two hybrids right there, they're twins. They're not identical twins, what I showed you, but they came from the same family, same breeding program, everything at the same time. All right? But their management is very, very, very different. And so when I think about this, increasing population or decreasing it on soybeans, we can have some interaction there. If we strategically place nitrogen or other nutrients close to that soybean root, can we influence yield by doing that sort of thing? And can we get prolific root growth out of soybeans like we do in corn in those boxes? So the question I have today is, when we look at those small rooted hybrids, like the previous one I showed you there, they increase by population. They increase yield by strategically placing nutrients close to the plant. Is that the same for a soybean, which I would consider a small rooted legume? What do you guys think? If we look at soybeans, can they grow the same way? Those are soybean roots, folks. That's what happens when I put 4 soybean roots in an old chemical tote. I fill it with diamond dry. You know, the stuff you scatter across a baseball field to help it dry out, fill in some potholes. I fertigate it and I irrigate it. I grow it up into the reproductive stages, about R1, R2. That is the prolific growth of a soybean root when you give it space. You give it nutrients and you give it water. What you see there in the little dots, those are not nodules. Those are the diamond dry stuck to the root hairs, all right? The problem we noted with this is we didn't inoculate them. They didn't nodulate at all. That diamond dry it's not a sterile environment, but it's an inert matter that has no fertility, no bacteria, no symbiotic relationship, but they grow big. So when I start looking at soybeans and the way we can manage them with fertility and to get root growth like you see behind me on the screen, I think there's some ways to do it, all right? All the data I'm going to share with you today, all the thought process is relatively new data. I wouldn't go home and change your farms, or if you're a consultant or ag retail, I wouldn't tell everybody to do all this stuff. But what I want you to do is challenge the way of thinking, challenge the way that we've been producing soybeans and the way we're generating yield, because I think there's some very interesting things that come to the table throughout this presentation. The first one is planter applied nitrogen with soybeans. And I got 2 pictures up there. One's a concealed system and one's a dual dribble system. They're 2x2 systems. 2x2x2 or 2x2x0. You can argue on the depth of the concealed system all you want, but they're planter applied fertility. We've shown research time and time again that this is a valuable way and a great start to corn. So why can't we maximize these pieces of equipment that in some cases are, like the conceal, $1,100 to $1,200 per row unit? Why can't we maximize those over soybeans? So we started looking at applying nutrients to the soybean crop with investments we've already made in these planter applied fertility systems. The first one there is looking at the dual dribble system. So the reason I highlight that one is because it's a system that you can add to a planter for about $90 a row, probably less if you put it on yourself. So it doesn't cost a whole lot to do this. You can dribble it out one side, dribble it out the back side. And the reason I share this data with you is because when we add nitrogen to soybeans at planting in our practical farm research data across 7 different sites, 78% of the time we have a positive ROI return to us. All right, so 78% of the time, adding 15 to 30 units of nitrogen at planting is giving us a yield response. You can see those numbers up there. They're not little numbers. They're not minuscule ROI. In some cases, we're 20, 30, almost $40 an acre return on investment by applying nitrogen there. Some of these are on extremely fertile soils. You look at Iowa, you look at our Kentucky sites. Those things are well taken care of. They're silt loam in the Drummer series. They have all the nutrients and everything they need right there. And by strategically placing nitrogen, getting that plant off to a little bit better start, a more robust root system early on in the season, we're seeing gains by doing that. We didn't just stop at nitrogen on these planter-applied fertility studies. We went on and built on those programs. We looked at thiazole, UAN's right there in the middle, the average of all of our studies over 2 years, and then potassium thiosulfate. All liquid systems, all ran through the conceal or the dribble system. What you can see there is when we add fertility, we don't necessarily increase the depth of rooting. Time and time again, when we dig these up, we measure root size, root depth. We don't necessarily increase the depth of the main root or the taproot. But what we do see is an increase in lateral branching, and we don't see any adverse effects to nodulation. When I count these things in the R2, R3 growth stage, most of these plants in the control, the thiazole, the UAN, or the KTS, they all have between 21 and 24 actively nitrogen-producing nodules on them. So the old thought process of if we give soybeans nitrogen up front, they're going to get tall and rank and lazy and they're not going to nodulate, it's not the case that we're seeing across these studies. We see the thiazole in these 2-year studies creep to the top on return on investment, giving us a little increase there in the kick with the sulfur, helping out nodulation a little bit there, making the soybean plant more effective. So one key thing there to look at is, this strategically applied, closely placed to the root zone nitrogen applications or sulfur applications have been a benefit to us. And if you're already invested in that equipment, it's going to help push ROI on your farms. The other thing we looked at is what we call the tillage study. But realistically, this is a strip till study. All right. So we've been looking at the effects of strip till, banded nutrients under that row and planting right on top of it. The studies we're seeing here is a 2-year study. We've actually been looking at this for 4 years. The first 2 years we looked at it, we made a strip, put fertility in it, planted corn on it, came back, planted soybeans right on the same strip. And we were starting to see where those soybean strips were having more vigorous growth to them, and they were yielding higher. When we hand harvested them on the strip versus off the strip, we were seeing higher yields. And so we started doing banded studies with dry fertility in the strip. It's a little bit hard to read up there. The gray bar highlights the highest ROI we see. And in this year, when we tested it in 2024, the highest ROI is when we didn't supply fertility at all. And the reason for that was we got caught in the complex of high dry fertility prices, right? $500, $600, $700 per ton potash. And we got caught with an average soybean price in that $11 range. And so when we put ROI to these, we sometimes, depending on the year, get caught with a stagnant soybean market price versus a higher fertility price. So not applying any fertility had the highest ROI, but the lowest yield in this case right here. So strip till is something that we've been looking at. We're going to continue to look at it. We even see an increase in yield in our strip till studies when we plant on 15-inch rows and have 30-inch strips. All right, so 15-inch strip till is called conventional tillage for those of you that don't know, because there's just nothing left of residue cover on it. So 30-inch strip till is the way to go when we're looking at it. Another cool study we do that I want to bring to your attention, and I will tell you right off the bat, there is zero profitability in this study. Okay? Every year we shoot for 125 bushel soybeans. We got a site where we have linear irrigation over the top, we have drip irrigation below, and we have Nutri-Drip lines so we can apply fertility under the soil surface at any time we want to. This 125 bushel attempt, over the last, since 2018, we've only hit it one time, and that was 130 bushels in 2022. This year, we got in that 110, 112 bushel range, didn't quite get there. We got linear pivots over the top. Up until 2022, one of our limiting factors was nighttime temperatures, and we couldn't cool the canopy of that crop. It didn't matter how much nutrients we put out there, how much we fed them, how much disease we kept out. We couldn't cool the canopy in these lush environments. We couldn't get the yield we wanted. The other thing in these environments is we built a multi-row unit, multi-variety, variable rate planter. So we can go through the field and we can plant 10-inch rows, hit a management zone, go to 20-inch rows, go to 30-inch rows as we go through the field. Every time we hit 125 bushel yield, it's on a 10-inch row. It's on the narrowest row spacing possible. All right. Here's a little bit of what we did this year. You can see it up there. There's a lot of stuff in furrow. There's Terramax, there's brown sugar, so a biological, a biostimulant, and then Capture LFR insecticide. We come back, dribble out the back with Xyway fungicide. This is on top of an already treated soybean. We got R1 applications, R3 applications with the drone. When I tell you this is not profitable, this is way beyond not profitable. I mean, we're $600 in the hole on this baby. But what we can look at, that's a bad ROI, right? In the name of research. But what we can look at is we do different replications of this. So we can pick out the different things that are working in our study. And over the past 3 years, one of the things that's given us the biggest kick on yield is our R1 and R3 applications to soybeans with boron. Just a simple 10% boron product giving us yield responses. The other thing we're seeing giving us good yield responses is a biostimulant. And quite frankly, the nano brown sugar or the dextrose that we use, it's a simple sugar substance. It costs us like 50 cents an acre, and it's giving us returns. All the other stuff we test, it gets lost in the mud. It doesn't have a huge response. It's not giving us big kicks. It's not giving us a lot of plant growth benefits, and it's costing us money. You can see from the nutrient load that we did at the bottom there, almost 200 pounds of nitrogen, 30 to 40 pounds of P and K right there in season. So we're really feeding these things. We're still having trouble hitting that 125 bushel mark. But just a way to influence you to think of the compounding effect of some of these management practices that we've been doing here on our farm. I'm about to go full off the rails here, just so you know, okay? We had 2 studies this year in all of our research in soybeans that eclipsed 100 bushel per acre. I just showed you one of them in the 125 bushel attempt. We fed those soybeans to the max. We made no money on them. One of the other studies that we hit 100 bushel to the acre was fall seeding of soybeans. All right? So some of you in the room may remember, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, there were some seed coatings that you could plant them in the fall or early in the spring, and they'd come up, they'd germinate, everything would be fine, and they didn't work that well. We're testing that again. So we have a experimental poly coating that goes on soybeans. You treat them at a % of seed weight covering. So you'll see we have 4, 6, and 8% coatings. That's a % of the seed weight. That much weight is going on in the coating. We tested these things, and we have a variance of planting dates all the way from October 26th to December 14th, depending on where we were at and when the ground was fit to plant them. Now, I'll come right out right now and say I don't think this is a viable option for most farmers at this point in the game. But if we have the opportunity in the future to have a product like this that works, and you can spread some of your workload out, and maybe you plant a few problematic fields late in fall if they're dry. Maybe you get some of your acres planted that are historically later in May or maybe even in early June that are problematic to get into, or they just don't dry out, or whatever that may be. Could you switch that to a fall seeded opportunity? Could you save money as a producer doing this? As a guy that works for a seed company, you know what happens with beans that we don't sell in that year? They get incinerated. It's a loss right off the top. Are those beans going to hold germ until fall, and maybe we can give them to you at a discounted rate? I think there's a lot of options here that we need to explore. But fall seeding picture we got right here from one of our sites, 4% coating and 6% coating respectively. You can see on April 3rd, 8 of those were, and 10 of them we dug up with the 4% coating. 8 of them were rotted, 2 of them germinated, and 0 were sitting dormant. That's not a great return. 4% coating, probably not getting it done for us. But at the 6% coating, we had 1 rotten one and 1 germinated, and the rest were sitting there dormant. This is what they look like in Minnesota. So these were taken on March 12th. So still in Minnesota, pretty cool. I'll tell you guys this, the farther south we get, the less this technology works. All right. When you get those temperature swings in late January, early February, as we get down into the Delta region, into southern Illinois, places like that, some of these things break dormancy. We get cold again. They don't grow. They rot. So the farther north we get, the better this works. You can see it 6% and 8%, still sitting there planted like the day we did it. I mean, still firm seed coats, everything right there. That's what they look like from above, okay? That 4% coating, pretty darn sporadic in there. Not really a stand that I'd be going for if I was producing soybeans. No coating, those are spring planted soybeans. 6%, obviously we talked about that already. The unique thing that I see about these, and I can stand up here and tell you I can't explain this right now, but when we fall seed these soybeans, every time we dig them up, they have more nodules to them. They have a thicker stem, and they have more lateral branching of the roots. I can't tell you why. I don't have that information, but it's something we see time and time again. You can see these were from Central Illinois, November 3rd and December 14th, 2 planting dates there. December 14th, we made 101.5 bushel on those soybeans, planted December 14th at our El Paso site just over here, north of El Paso, Illinois. Pretty impressive for doing nothing else out of the norm, just giving them an early plant date. All right? Multi-location, that's the look at the stands. Now, we know going into this from our 4%, 6%, and 8% over multi-locations from north to south, we can't go in at our standard planting rate of 130,000. We got to boost that up. We got to have that insurance coverage there for us coming out of the fall. We run in some weather patterns that aren't conducive. We get warm springs. You're not going to like the results you get. So we up the population there a little bit. You can see the final emerge populations on each one of those and the difference versus the spring planting, the May planting date there. All right, let's talk about yield. Overall, all of our locations, our fall seeded soybeans yielded more than our spring seeded ones. Now, we can argue there that May 16th to the 20th on those planting dates aren't the greatest time to plant beans. I would push everybody in the room to plant beans as soon as the ground's fit in the spring. We've seen return on investment on that time and time again. But what this can mimic and what this can simulate is those later planted fields, those ones that you have trouble getting into. Maybe you have a lot of acres and that's just when you finish every single year. Maybe you have poor producing ground or heavy water holding capacity ground that you just can't get into. Could we replace some of those later planted fields with the fall planted pass? I think it's an option that once we get this coating figured out, once it's tested and viable, this could be something that becomes the norm. You guys are looking at me like I'm crazy. That's the looks I wanted, though. Make it think. You can see different locations. We tested this over 2 years. Central Illinois and Iowa. Central Illinois, our fall seeded beans over the last 2 years have done better. Iowa, they're running neck and neck. Minnesota, better. And then in Nebraska, where it's a little more arid, we get a flop there, flip-flop between the 4% and the 6% coating. All right, so just some interesting information to share for you. There's it is in just a different graph, a little bigger for you to see. All right, I got 5 minutes left here. We have tested more biologicals, more biostimulants, and I get more questions, and my teams get more questions on biologicals than anything else that we target for soybean growth and development and for corn growth and development. And I'll tell you right now that I don't have all the answers in this realm. You know, the soils and the biologicals that are in there and what they do, there's some uncharted territory in there. There's a lot to learn with the different interactions in rooting. There's a lot of different interactions between nutrient uptake and biologicals, between bacteria and fungi and protozoa and all that stuff. I don't think anybody has the answers. But I can tell you this. By 2030, that's the USDA's estimate of the valuation of the biological industry in agriculture. That's $31 billion. If you don't think there's going to be some look and some influence and some opportunity in the biological market with a number like that up there, I think we're all, looking at it the wrong way. This is a market that I hope takes off. I think it's great for the soybean plants. I think it's great for nutrient reduction. I think it's great for management practices. But I can tell you right now that a lot of us don't understand the full capacity or the full interaction between these biologicals and biostimulant products and crop production as we see it right now. All right? 2017 to 2023, in our practical farm research at 12 different sites over these years, we tested 64 biological products. That PFR proven stamp right there, we give that to products and practices that we test 3 years. Every single year we test them, they have a yield increase over the control, and over that 3-year period, they have a positive return on investment on average, okay? Of those 64 biological products that we've tested, only 15 of them have met that criteria. So every year we test them, they get a positive yield gain, and over that 3 years, they have positive ROI. Those 15 products, every single one of them is labeled and sold as a biostimulant. They are not the ones that contain the biologicals, the live biologicals or heat kill biologicals. They are all fertility products or sugar substances that are built to stimulate biological activity in the naturally occurring biology that's already present in your soil. And so the Mega Micro 8000 that has 8,000 different strains of everything you can put in a jug and is alive, those will have the highest yield responses when we test for one single year. We can't get them to replicate. We can't get them to be a positive ROI. But when we see big yield gains of 10, 12, 15 bushel to the acre, it's always a live biological product. But we can't replicate that. We can't have synergy year over year with that, and I don't know why. But these biostimulant products, these that are built to feed what's already active in your soil, those are the ones that we get consistency out of, and we get minor returns on investment. So if you're looking to try something, if you're looking to recommend something, at this point with our knowledge base, I think the biostimulants are the way to go. The only biological that I know that works all the time is this one right here. That's my favorite biological product. All right, so if you're looking to designate some of your crop budget into biologicals, access some of this stuff right here. I don't care what animal it comes from. I don't care if they got 4 legs, 2 legs, lay eggs. I don't care what they do. Biological returns through the use of manure has been something that's consistently been on par. With that said, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the invite to be part of this Illinois Soybean Summit. And we're going to continue to look at this stuff. We're going to adapt root reveal and other things for root interception and root growth and development to be part of our soybean management program. Because I think a lot of times we've left soybeans to scavenge what's left after corn, and we don't necessarily give them a fair shake. So increased management of soybeans, I think, is going to be the thing that pushes us to the next yield level we have. Thank you all for your time today.
Well, welcome back for the main event of the program. Hope you enjoyed both our lunch speaker, both the lunch and Beck's engaging presentation.